Welcome and thank you for tuning in to Cryptids, Creeps, and Conspiracy. The following content may involve explicit language and materials, so listener discretion is advised.
Your number one thing here is nightmares, and you are talking to the poster child for horrible nightmares. I've had everything, which I guess sometimes they're considered nightmares, because some of them are definitely nightmares, and I don't understand it. I have had situations where, oddly enough, I go to sleep and I wake up in a dream and I am a different person, usually somebody that I know, and I find out I'm having a baby, right? So I'm having a baby. I know if it's a boy or a girl and all this stuff. The first few times that happened, I didn't say anything, and then found out a month later that these people were pregnant. And I was like, oh. Then I found out that it was exactly what I said it was going to be, boy or girl. And I'm like, oh. So then it kept happening to now people are a little nervous when I call them. If I ever say anything, but I had a dream about you, they panic because they're like, oh God, am I pregnant? And I'm like, no, I think you're good. So that's happened to me a lot, whereas it's literally whether the pregnancy is viable, whether it's not viable, no matter what the case is, I have seen it. I've not done it for anybody who's outside of the family circle. I don't really know what's up with that, but it always seems to be somebody in the circle. And aside from that, I've also had dreams where, I go to bed, I wake up, I am in another person's body. Typically, it's either somebody that I know or somebody that I know knows. So it's like a outwards thing. I've had one incident where I had no clue who the person was, but I watched them die. And when I woke up the next morning, they were on the news. There's a woman I've never seen. I don't know anything about her. And she was about an hour away from me. And they were investigating her death on the news the next morning with the same method that I saw the whole thing happen with. And then I've had a bunch where I wake up, I'm somebody that I recognized, I'm in surroundings that I recognized, and then I pass away in my dream. And within 48 hours, it's either as it's happening up to about 48 hours. And whoever it is, in whatever weird circumstances, even one where my stepfather-in-law or something, I think that's the correct terminology, I've never met him. When I married my husband, he was already in a nursing home. So I've never laid eyes on him. I don't know anything about him except he's in a nursing home and what his name was. That's all I had. And then I went to sleep one night and I woke up and I don't know what he looks like, but I knew where I was. And I was in my mother-in-law's house, but I was in a hospital bed in her house. And I was like, what is happening? And then somebody had said my name, which was his name at the time. And I was like, okay, this is weird. And then again, I passed away there and I had gotten up and I told my husband, I was like, hey, if you have anything that you need to say to this man, you need to call today. I said, because he's not going to make it. And he's, oh, what are you talking about? And I told him the whole dream. I was like, he was in your mom's house and all this stuff. And that doesn't make any sense. He's been in a nursing home for years. He's not going to leave the nursing home, blah, blah, blah. You're full of crap. And I'm like, I'm telling you, if you've got something to say it. I was like, don't ask me how. I just know. Later that same day after I woke up, his mom called to inform us that they were moving him to hospice and moving him into her house. And the next day he died in her house. Exactly like I said. So that kind of thing happens. It doesn't happen all the time, but it's probably been like 7 or 8 times, which is enough for me to be like, what the? And they do. So there's a different feeling when you have that type of dream as opposed to anything else. But aside from those situations, I have horrifying and vivid nightmares all the time, to where I take medicine to try to tone it down. And now I just have very vivid dreams that are either strange or okay. They're just not horrible. I'm talking scream so bad in the middle of the night in my dream that I'm waking myself up. I'm kicking and punching and throwing and just violent. I think I have probably been murdered in my sleep, almost every way imaginable, from being dismembered, disemboweled, caught on fire, drowned, car accident. It's just, and I have no idea where it's coming from. So what's your view on nightmares?
Oh, I love it. There's so much. So first of all, the first half of everything you share, the more premonition type of dreams, makes absolute sense because in your waking life, you're very intuitive, you're very connected, and you've said it even a couple of times of, hey, I'm just trying to figure out how to make sense of all of this. So when you're conscious, awake, and you have that level of intuition happening, when you're asleep, it's amplified. Slipping into other people's bodies or seeing things, whether it's energetically, emotionally in that dream state or not, your ability to merge with other people's fields is a natural gift you have. You already do it in your waking life where you feel everybody else's stuff.
Yeah.
So in the dream state, you're doing the same thing. It's just that open receptivity is a lot greater. So it could be that you're in proximity to something. It could be that you're in emotional proximity, which basically means you don't have to live anywhere near that person. But if there's a bond, a connection, like you said, people in your circle.
When I say my mother-in-law, they live 4.5 hours away.
Yeah.
I have never met this man. It almost reminds me, if you guys have not seen the show Medium, it is an older show with a little blonde lady, Alison Dubois. My husband and I have been watching it. We just found it like a month ago, and we've been watching it pretty consistently. And so many times I'm watching this show and I'm like, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I was saying. This is exactly what happens to me. This is what happens. If anybody is dealing with anything like that, I seriously recommend go watch that show, because if you're wanting to try to explain to somebody what is happening to you and they don't understand, that show does a very good job of giving a visual aid to say, this is what's happening to me that I cannot explain, but here, you can see it visually, and that sometimes helps them understand a little bit more of what you're going through. Okay, sorry.
No, this is great. It's so good. And I think it helps people differentiate between dreams like that are premonitions and nightmares, because sometimes our fear is that the nightmare is going to be a premonition or that the nightmare is going to be the thing that happens. Often, so the way this psyche works is it borrows other people, it borrows images, it borrows different things in order to convey information, but it doesn't convey information straightforward like we do when we're communicating. So symbols, movements, actions, all of those things happen. And the clear thing between a nightmare and what you were speaking of earlier, and you even said this, is it has its own feeling to it. There's a very specific feeling that is different with a premonition versus a nightmare. A nightmare is going to take a hold of the nervous system sometimes, for sure, where if it's really intense, and then if we have any type of what's called a somatic reaction to the nightmare, which is body-based. So some people have no memory of the nightmare. They don't have the storyline. They don't even know who else was in it. They just wake up and they're sweating, or they feel a sense of impending doom or dread or terror. The residual emotions are left in the body. The nightmare itself, we can break it down. And we want to just try to remember, when I come out a nightmare with someone, I first am very careful as I work with them, because for some people, it is the processing of trauma trying to make its way out of the nervous system, and using these figures, these forms, these narratives that are hidden within this discombobulated sort of storyline that we're tapping into, right? It's an outlet in that sense. So there is some processing sometimes going on. But there's other times within a nightmare, and I love to use nightmares that involve being chased to illustrate this. Because a lot of times in a nightmare like that, where something is chasing you, something's after you, you might be running, you might see what's after you, you might not see what's coming to get you. You just have the feeling. You might see yourself in the whole dream, or you might just know that you're moving away from something. And usually what I'll have clients do is sit with that energy. So at first, there's a couple steps that I recommend. The first thing is write the whole dream out. Everything you can remember, dump it out on paper. Dump out everything from, I felt this way, I remember this detail. Don't edit it. Don't censor it. Don't try to make it a perfect story. It's not like for publication. You're just getting it out of your system. This gives us a little bit of psychological distancing from the thing we just experienced, because often it has a grip on us. Nightmares are gripping. They're very different. There's dreams that are unsettling and they linger, but nightmares have a different kind of feeling they leave us with. So by diffusing it and naming it, by putting it on paper, that's one of the first ways we start to become a little bit more objective. And then the next step is I tell the client, if I'm working with them directly, I would say, what is the theme? If you were to just take all of these discombobulated parts and look at what is the big theme that really is like telling you to focus on it, because you'd be surprised. It's not always the figure that's chasing us that has our attention. Sometimes it's the chase itself.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a weird thing of
Where are you
location.
running?
Yeah, like all these things. So we focus on what we would call the central image of the dream. So the central image is going to be the main thing that's really got your attention. And you can revisit the process and look at all of the different parts as you do this, but you start there. And then what I usually would do with someone is say, okay, I want you to take yourself out of this completely. Take yourself out of the nightmare completely, because then it doesn't feel so personal. We can start to track and trace and look at the patterns. And so then we start breaking that down. And usually what happens is I'll say, how did that feel in the body? What comes to mind? Does this remind you of another time in your life? So sometimes there's an emotion that we can't pinpoint that might not even feel like it fits with the story because it isn't linear. Again, it's not logic. It's just impressions we're getting. And if we can tune into that, we start to realize, oh my gosh, the last time I actually felt this way was when I was 6 years old and blah, blah, blah happened. And I was really scared. I'm like, does that feel similar? Like when you had that dream, did you feel like your 6-year-old self? Or that might be a way that we approach it. Because sometimes that's what happens is the nervous system is responding to the impressions from the part of us that's frozen in time. So we would call this psychologically arrested development, where a traumatic event happens and we pause or freeze in who we are at that time. And when we experience something that gets really close to that same set of ingredients of feelings, sensations, perceived threats, we can actually freeze again. And it's almost like the snapshot of who we were all of a sudden is responding. So you can feel like a 6-year-old or whatever age is the one responding. So that's another thing we look at. But basically, I go through and look at these different pieces, the tone, the mood, the reaction. And I have a really great, just brief one. I'll just share how I did this with a client who was having this dream where she was being chased and she was being chased and she was being chased. The nightmare kept changing. The element of being chased didn't stop, but the location changed. What was chasing her changed. At this time, when the nightmare started, she was actually she was invited into this business proposition situation. She was torn, but she wasn't quite sure. Anyway, this dream it's haunting her. She's being chased. She starts waking up feeling like it's really throwing her off now. It's starting to impact her day. And when I worked with her, I could tell, I just had this sense, this intuition. I was like, this doesn't necessarily feel like a trauma of the past that's trying to work its way out. I feel like it's more something going on. So when I work with people, I have an ability, I don't say it ability because it makes it sound like a special thing. It's not. We can all do this, but I've honed myself where I can feel into people's nervous systems and get a sense of what's going on there. And so while I was doing that, my intuitive impression was, I don't think this is a trauma. I actually think this is something in your life that's trying to get your attention.
Yeah.
So then she didn't make the connection yet between the job or the business thing, whatever. And I said to her, I'm like, what would happen if you just stopped and let yourself be caught? And she's like, I don't know. And that idea scared the crap out of her a little bit. So she practiced with that. So sometimes some of us are better at being more lucid dreamers where we control what's going on in the dream. I suck at that. I'll just be honest. It takes me a long time to remember what I'm doing in the dream state. I'm at the whim of it, but she was able to do this. I think it was after 3 or 4 attempts of this dream repeating that she was able to remember and to start taking control. And what happened is she stopped, and this figure, it was like this shadowy, creepy, whatever figure thing that was coming at her, got super close and intense. And then it just fell. It was almost like a veil, like it just fell like a sheet to the ground. And she looks down at her feet and there's a fox that curls up and sits down at her feet.
I love foxes.
So she wrote this whole thing out. She's like, this is crazy. I don't know what this means, whatever. She writes the whole thing down. And the way that I work with nightmares and dreams is I'm not going to send you to go look at the internet or go look at a book or the meeting. I'm going to say, like, how do you feel? What's going on? Your psyche is trying to tell you what's going on. What does fox mean to you? What's popping in your head when you look at that creature? When you imagine you're engaging with it, you imagine it's still real because on some level it is real. Imagination still comes from somewhere. Yeah. So we work with that. And what she ultimately figured out is she was running away from her instinct. by choosing to go down this path with this career opportunity, which blew up and became a huge nightmare. But this dream was trying to show her, you're being like, something's hunting you and coming at you. She wasn't reflecting. She wasn't making time during the day to sit with how she really felt about it. She was so caught in what other people were thinking. Oh, it's such a great opportunity. You have to do this. It's amazing, that it was really dimming her instinct. She couldn't hear herself. And there was this all still voice within her that was saying, this is not for you. But because during her waking day, her daily life, she was busy, she was active, she wasn't paying attention, her nightmare, her nighttime life had to get really loud to get her to pay attention. When she did, the fox curls up at her feet. It took about 3 months for her to really process this entire dream. What she realized was this was the surrendering into her instinct. This was the, look at this beautiful, warm, intelligent, wise, cunning creature that knows how to perceive things, that knows how to cut through the noise. They're known as being very clever and sneaky, but she needed that ability to navigate the weirdness of the business transaction that was going on, that was trying to throw some things past her. They were trying to, so it was saying, hey, you need this instinctual part of you. You need this part of you that can sniff out the lies, that can detect deceit. And she was cutting herself off from that. So it came through in her nightmare, chasing her, literally trying to get her attention.
Hey,
she got it. And she made the right decision. And then later she got the evidence. So those of us that are super intuitive like this, what happens is we get weird evidence all the time. You probably have people tell you things and you're like, why do they tell me that? Or why did that happen? Just like the dreams. And then all this
time.
bank it in your mind somewhere. And then one day happens and you go, oh, interesting that I know this random detail about this thing that I now need to make a decision on, or I need to remember, or what. So it's, but we always, when we have a really deep connected sense of intuition and we haven't learned how to hone it yet, we always feel like we have to do something with it or make sense of it. So instead, what I just encourage people to do is write it all out, give it a place to go, because then it doesn't need to compete for your attention anymore. It knows it's got your attention because you put it in a journal or you put it in a notebook. It gives you some space. And then you start to go, oh, there's another impression here. There's another intuition here. Now I'm being led on what to do with this, if anything. Sometimes it's just showing up for us to show us how deeply, intricately we are connected with the universe, with other people. It doesn't necessarily mean that everything that comes to us is meant for us to share, but we don't know that because when it's happening, it feels like a burden or responsibility. But when we start working with these things, we can start to see past the illusion, like the being chased. I worked with another client, same kind of thing, being dismembered in the dream. And what the output was, she was cutting parts of herself off because she didn't want to feel. And how interesting. There's ways to play with these graphic images safely, of course, if you feel safe to do that, to explore them. Think of them as movements instead of literal forms, and your nightmares will shift and become dreams with just very deep, philosophical, sometimes intricately, intuitively woven details that the waking mind wasn't able to perceive or make sense of.
So one thing I was thinking is, also, if you're writing these dreams, nightmares, whatever out, sometimes as you're writing it, what your brain is trying to say, you're trying to describe something or explain exactly what it was. Sometimes doing that makes your awake, semi-awake brain, depending on how awake you are at the time, come up with what can I compare that to? What's happened to me where I can compare this? And that sometimes triggers, oh, okay. Like it maybe coming up with those descriptions and everything actually helps you understand more of what actually happened, because you can be like, oh, back when I was 6, I felt the same feeling. Maybe that's what it is. A lot of mine, they're pretty random and they're all extremely violent, like all the time. And it's always people dying. It's always people being murdered. The ones that I've had that aren't the different ones, we'll not talk about those ones at the moment, but the normal nightmares, they are very vivid. You can feel everything. There's air. You can smell everything. You could hear everything. You can touch everything. You feel the pain when it's happening to you. And sometimes I get a little concerned because I'm like, if some of my dreams are like this and this happens, but it's before it happens, what if these other ones are things that are happening or have happened to people that I don't know? How do I know what's what? Because a lot of them have absolutely nothing to do with anything. I don't recognize anyone, or none of the situations make any sense, but it's like it's so vivid that it's trying to tell me what it is. Now, I have noted, the only thing I've noticed is, although I have a bunch of them, if we were to get a piece that showed up a little more than the others, would be something about, it'd be like water. Like I don't like water. I don't know why I don't like water. I just don't. Like, I don't even like my skin to be wet. I don't like it when you get out of the shower and you're, ugh. But anyway, there's a lot of drowning involved. But sometimes they're very weird. So I had one, and in my dream, I think it was like a kid, like I was a little girl, but it was caveman days, right? And I was with this woman that I don't know, but in my dream, I knew it was my mom. So I guess it was my mom. And we were going through this wooded area, and there was this cave, like these two boulders with like a little crevice in the middle. And there was a little boy who had already gone into it. So I guess that's maybe my brother had gone into the cave, squeezed in. And back in the day, sometimes they would hide in crevices and then they would cover it to protect them from any creatures or whatever while they were sleeping. And she told me to get in, and I just barely fit, squeezed in this crevice, and I was waiting for her to come in, but she's obviously too big. And she was like, I can't fit, but I'll be back to get you. And she rolls this giant rock in front of the crevice. So it's just me and my brother in this hole. And she just never came back. We just sat in there and starved to death. But that was one that it was very weird because it felt similar to the ones that I have before they happened, but this was clearly a long time ago. So I was like, was there like a past life situation that I just peeked into, or what? Because whoever's body, because a lot of times if you wake up and you're in someone's body, you can feel it. When you go stay at a hotel and you wake up in the hotel, you're not in your house. You can just feel that you're not in your house. But when you're in your house, you're in your house. So sometimes when I wake up and I'm in somebody's body, I can clearly tell them, like, this is not me. Like, this is, the energy is not me. It just has a different vibe. But this one in particular, when I got up, even though I was a younger girl, and I recognized the woman as my mother, but in my brain, I don't think I've ever seen this before. This is new. It still felt like I was in my own body. I don't know much about the whole past life situation, but if I was to ever encounter that, I was like, that I think is probably what it was. Because even though it was forever ago, I don't want to call it essence, that's a weird word, but it's almost like my soul or something inside me was comfortable and familiar with the body I was in. I didn't feel out of place this time. It was really weird.
So interesting. I love this because there's something really cool that happens when we explore dreams. We start to play with the idea of possibility. And one of the possibilities is, sure, past life. Another possibility is current life and symbolic representation of these different patterns at play. And the cool thing about all of that is I tend to honor all of it and say, I don't know what's what. And sometimes sorting that out is helpful and sometimes it's not. But if we can focus on the images that are presenting themselves, it still helps. So for example, if it's somebody that passed away and this is coming to you, you're still helping through the acknowledgement of the scenario, which is all they may need in order to continue on their journey. If you believe in that could be part of it. If it's you and yourself in a past life, it could be something in the current lifetime is speaking to this pattern that's repeated, and we're trying to see it symbolically in this other way for something going on here, or just deep within the psyche. It's just something symbolic of the psychology of what's happening in the here and now, and it's presenting this way. So this is where I would use my intuition, and I would also guide the client to say, how do you feel? What do you notice? But what came to me too is like when we work with dreams, we're really working with these archetypes, and the archetypes are not these fixed stereotypical boxes of things we label. Archetypes are empty sort of containers in a way. It's like what we project and how we see it is what it becomes. Like we can all hear the word mother and have very different meaning of what mother means. How a physical mother, we can think of people that are motherly in our lives.
I came out of those hips.
Right?
Yeah.
We can see the shadow and the light side of mother, right? So anyhow, when you're describing it, it's so interesting too, because landmarks in dreams are essential. So the woods, caves, water, all are very symbolic of the unconscious, the depth of our being. Sometimes we're afraid when we're going into those places. Sometimes it's the unknown we're being confronted with. I find it very interesting that the mother too, the great mother is often nature, Mother Earth, motherly figures. So depending on our relationship with that type of energy, because it doesn't just have to be at our mother figure, it can be women in general, motherly forms, women of authority, depending on how we feel about all that. If we look about this symbolically, we have this mother who's left us, who's abandoned us in our unknown, deep, vulnerable state and has closed the door on us in a weird way and is leaving us there and now no food. So what I was hearing in that is we can't be nurtured in this space. We're not being nurtured in the space she left us in. So I would probably explore that. And again, if this is symbolic, whether it's literal or real, doesn't matter. I always treat the perception as if it's real. Because to me, it doesn't matter. If somebody believes in something I don't believe in, that doesn't mean it's not real for them. Or that doesn't mean I'm right or wrong. It just means that something is alive within that perception. So that's how I would look at that, is something's alive in this perception. When we want to pin it down, there's nothing wrong with that. It's helpful sometimes to say where it's coming from or why.
It was just really weird because when you talk about the feelings and stuff, it was like everything. I could feel the cold on the rocks and getting in there, but I never felt scared. It was almost like she was trying to get me safe, but I didn't feel threatened or scared or anything. And I was like, oh. And I just remember the boy was like all scrunched in with his knees up. There wasn't a lot of space in there. And so we get in there and I never remember feeling afraid or anything. It was literally like I was watching a movie.
Wow.
It was almost like, oh, I remember when this happened, but I have no idea what the hell it was.
That's so important. Thank you for saying that, because that just shows right there. It's also easy to make assumptions, like for me to even assume that you were afraid because you're in this position when that's not necessarily
I was just
reality.
like, okay.
Yeah.
And I just climbed in the hole. I was like, all right.
It's so interesting. And I love that you had a sense. I don't know how you what you would consider this to be, a sense, a knowing, an intuition, a feeling, a idea of just being safe in there. So now it actually flips it in a completely different direction. So it's not necessarily the not being safe. This could be a very cozy, small, secure space that you're into by this loving, right? And
back then in those times, that wasn't an abnormal place. It's not like they had houses. So I wonder if maybe we knew about that place already. I never got a feeling of it was new or anything. It was just, climb in. I was like, okay. And then it was just the door closed. And it was just really weird because I was in there and there was no noise. We were really dirty and our hair was all scraggly because cavemen. And it was like the mom closed the door. And it was like somehow I knew that whatever she was hiding us from got her. I was like, now what do we do? Because we can't move the rock. Now we just brought it.
Interesting.
So it was just, it was really bizarre. But I've had some that are just, they're just crazy. One, I didn't feel like me. And we were in this pickup truck in this big field. And there was this old ass white trash trailer. And this guy had this beat up truck. And I didn't really see his face, but I know he had a hat on and like a t-shirt and some jeans. And I don't know why the hell I was in the truck, but I was in the truck. And he grabbed me by the top of my hair and dragged me out of the truck. And I was kicking and screaming. And he's just dragging me to this trailer. And I remember because it was like faded. It was like white painted, like aluminum trailer looking thing, like a boxy one, not the kind you hook to a truck, but like an actual sit there trailer. And it was beat up looking, and it had almost like center block looking, like there's two little stairs before you got to the door, and it had just the two little blocks, and then the door was open, and he's dragging me in there, and I looked in the trailer as he's dragging me in, And my sister, which I'm iffy because I'm like, I knew it was my sister, but I don't even remember if she looked like my actual literal sister. But it was my sister. I don't know, whoever I was. And there was a guy in there on top of her. And they drugged me in, and the whole assault process started. And then they poured gasoline all over me and my sister and the floor. They just poured gasoline everywhere. They walked out the door, and he just lit a match and dropped it, and the whole thing just up in flames. And I was just like, what the hell just happened? How do you feel about recurring dreams?
Recurring dreams are interesting because that's usually a lot of the nightmares that I end up working with people on aren't necessarily a one and done. Like sometimes they are recurring. Like the one example I gave of the woman with the shadow that turned into like a fox at her feet. I think she had that dream at least 4 or 5 different times before we had even started really like digging into it. And then it did come up again because she had tried to go back into the dream and work with it. So another couple of times. And that was all within, I think, about a 3-month process from start to finish of her sharing the dream starting, her sharing the dream with me and the repetition of it. So repetitive dreams are really interesting. Like when they're repeating like that, there's certainly something there that feels unfinished that might be caught in a loop. It's not always about solving it like we would in a puzzle or something where we have a definitive ending. Sometimes it's just unfinished. The cool thing about dreams is we don't always have to specifically address every element in order for them to stop. We spontaneously do this all the time. We deal with something happens, and all of a sudden we go, oh, that dream just stopped on its own. So usually if we trust there's this idea that the psyche is self-regulating, that it's always trying to find its way back to balance, just like the body does. But sometimes it needs help. Sometimes it needs support. Sometimes there's some really difficult things in the way. So our dreams can show us and mimic this pattern, this process of trying to find balance. So it shows us disturbances. And sometimes if we look at a disturbance too literally, we feel disturbed by the images. But if we can work with it emotionally, symbolically, psychologically in that way, we can start to pull back from having it make it fit a certain narrative. So repetitive dreams, I would give the same sort of process, like really just starting by writing down what you can remember, trying to become more conscious as you can to the dream. Notice things outside of the dream. And I know this sounds funny, but a lot of people don't realize the dream is only one snapshot of what your psyche is trying to tell you. If you're mindful in the rest of your waking life, if you're paying attention to symbols, synchronistic moments, things that just you have this intuitive sense of, I don't know why, but I feel like I should pay attention to this. That's another way of your psyche regulating things, trying to show you things that might help you in the dream state too. So it's not an isolated thing. It's just it's a form of communication. It's extremely symbolic, and it takes a time and dedication for us to really be with it. We don't have to become masters of knowing what the symbols are because they shift and change. They may not be the same every time. But if we can become more curious and say, I don't know why this thing's repeating. I don't know what's going on here. Let me wonder about the tone, the feeling, if there is any, the location, the people. The other thing in Jungian psychology, there's an idea when we do dream analysis that some of the figures that are showing up are other parts of us. So it can be other parts of us. So if we see a small child, we can start thinking like, oh, I wonder, is this my innocence? Is this some part of me that was lost, separated, cut off, not allowed to be? And is this part showing up in my dream so that I can reclaim this? It's interesting too, because people that are technically, I would say, good people, somewhat, I don't like to use good or bad, but people that are of more moral integrity, good-hearted, they tend to have a lot of the dreams that are messed up and violent and what have you. And then people who are deeply disturbed in their waking life, some tend to have dreams that are about good things. So it's really interesting.
Oh, that actually makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
I 100% understand that. So, because I feel like, especially these people that are cookie cutter, all American housewife types or whatever, I think that I don't care how good you are. I don't care if you're freaking Gandhi or Mother Teresa. At some point in your life, you have had negative thoughts because that is natural. It's impulsive and you cannot
Right.
control it. Now, the
Absolutely.
people that are buttoned up and all that, they tend to suppress it a lot more. And so since they're not addressing it while they're awake, it's haunting them while they're asleep. And the
Right.
people that are weird, like us, that we are totally for it, we'll talk about it, whatever. But it doesn't really work in my case, apparently. But a lot of them, because they get it out, they don't have, if you don't give a shit and you're just who you are, you don't have that barking at the back door waiting for you to fall asleep so that it can get in. But yeah, so I have one recurring dream that I have, and it's weird. I have for a little bit and it goes away. And it's weird because it's one of those ones that the first time I had it, I didn't know because it was just the first time, right? I was like, oh, well, this is cool. And the second time, so the first time I had it, I'm in an auditorium looking thing, like a conference center or something. And there's a stage, like a baby stage, and the lights are low. And then they turn some like cool light stuff on. And the stage starts to glow up a little bit. And there's a lot of people in the room. I'm standing next to all these people that I don't recognize, but I'm there. And they start like playing this song that I don't know. I have no idea what it is, but they're playing the song. And at a certain point when the song plays, the back doors, those push open to escape doors, one opens and this person, it seemed like a male figure. He's got a hoodie with the hood up, dark jeans, dark hoodie, everything's darked out, right? And he comes in and he just starts fucking shooting everyone. And I get gunned down right there. I was like, I didn't last long. So then I had the dream again. And I was like, wait a minute. I know where I am. And I'm like, oh shit. And I just didn't react fast enough. Same exact situation. Guy comes in and I got gunned down. So then I have it again. And I'm like, okay. And I'm telling him, I'm like, there's something bad's going to happen. You need to follow me. Things are going to happen. I need you to follow me. And there's like an exit sign in the corner on the right. And I was like, follow me. We need to go to the exit. We made it to the exit door. It was locked. We get gunned down. I have it again. Same thing. I get him. I'm like, there's going to be an incident. We got to escape. You got to go out this door because there's only one exit. So we had no choice but to go out the door. So the door's open and like we go down a hallway, but he like catches us. Either he catches us or there's somebody else there, guns us down. So like we try all these routes and I have never made it out alive. Ever.
Interesting.
How
long ago was the last time you had that dream? I'm curious.
The last time I had it was, what is it? August. So maybe May.
Okay.
And then the time I had it before that was right before CryptidCon. I never go anywhere. I'm like a hermit, basically. And I don't go anywhere where this stage or anything would even be a problem because I'm like, I don't go anywhere. So this doesn't make any sense. Because at first I was like, oh crap, maybe I'm seeing it for a reason. But then I was like, that's weird. But then I go to CryptidCon and they have all the speakers in their auditorium. And I was like, okay. I was like, I refused to go in there. Like for the whole first day, I just didn't even go look. I had no idea what it looked like in there. And I was talking to somebody the next day about why I was hesitant to go in there. And here I am thinking I'm going to be, they'll laugh at, I told them crazy. And they both were looking at me and they were looking at each other. And they're like, can you do us a favor? Can you go look? Can you just go look at it? They're like, because if you look at it and you say it looks like what you saw, we're not going. But if it looks different, then we're fine. And I was like, okay. That was the longest freaking hallway I've ever walked out in my life.
Right.
But I walk in and the chairs are different. Everything. There was nothing in this area that looked even close to the same. And they waited at a booth. I have no idea who these people were. And they waited where I was standing when they saw me so that I could come back and find them. And I walked back. I was like, no, I was like, you guys are good. I was like, I don't recognize anything in there. And they're like, oh, thank God. Because we wanted to go listen to these people. And it was just really weird. I was thrown off because I was like, they never even questioned me. And I'm used to so many people being so negative. But to me, there's different ones where some people, like you said, it's like the recurring dream is addressing something or whatever. But I sometimes wonder if in certain situations, a recurring dream is your brain's way of training you to respond in that situation. It's coming and you need to know what to do when it comes. It's like muscle memory, only of your brain. We need you to, because fight or flight does not happen with your body. I guess it does, but your brain has to tell your body what to do, right? And so if you're not in that situation, you might freeze and be like, holy shit, what do I do? And then you're toast. But if your brain is almost like combat training, when you get exposed to this, when this happens, run. When this happens, go left or right or whatever, then it's like a boot camp over time until it happens.
Yeah.
I'm just hoping, I've just been too scared to go into any of the auditoriums to look.
Yeah, I don't blame you, especially with a lot of premonition type dreams. You do start to blur that line between, okay, is this symbolic or is this literal? Am I meant to find my way through something? And I would see if that doesn't come up again in that dream or as another dream. And I would wonder what would happen, because it sounds like you're trying to find a way out. So your attention is going on the exit. I wonder what would happen if you would confront the gunman.
Oh, considering I got shot within 10 seconds the first time, I don't think I got much luck.
Yeah.
I could try.
Maybe there's another way. That's the thing, because there's something about finding another way. If we're looking at this symbolically, and I don't want to say that's the only way around this, right? If it is a literal thing that's training you, then you'll find your way. You'll have the dream and eventually it'll come out. But I would wonder about playing with these different ways of interacting with this figure that's dangerous in the dream, because the dream state is where we can do that, right? It's definitely the place to work some of these things out. Or sometimes what I've actually had clients do with a lot of success actually is when they're writing it out in their journal, their notebook. The other thing we'll do is something called active imagination, where they'll take this dream figure and just dialoguing with it as if it's sitting in front of them and just see what pops into the mind. Like, what do you want from me? Why do you want to hurt me? What is this about? Do I know you? Is this familiar? Like, you start asking these questions and it shifts us from fear into curiosity, which when we're intentionally dialoguing with something that we're not under the grip of it, right? To do that while you're having a nightmare is, I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's difficult. But on paper, in between, when you've come out of it, when you're in a different state, you can start engaging with that energy in a different way to see what, if anything, can I learn from this? Can I uncover? And then putting it on paper in that way. Sometimes that creates this opening in the mind where something comes through, a bizarre idea, a random thing where you're like, where it seems random and it's not random. It's often some type of something. And then a connection is made and then something in the outer world will validate it. Like a conversation, a bizarre synchronistic moment. There's usually something that validates it to help us say, okay, I am on the right track with this. Otherwise, we just keep going with it and say, okay, what's here? And this is a long process. This is why people don't usually like my answer very much on that. Because sorry, I don't have the magic bullet, but your psyche does. I trust that part of you. I trust that part of you is given you this dream, presented this dream. For some reason, it's come to you. So how do we tend to it? How can we keep unfolding it to see what else might be there?
Yeah, because all I got from it was, as far as the guys, I just know what it was wearing. I could sense that it was a male and I could sense that he was very angry. That's all I got. It wasn't angry at any particular person. He was just angry and he was just taking everybody out. He didn't give
So I wonder if that's a person in your life that you could play around with writing about to say, do I know someone that is hurting people around them from just being how they are because their anger is uncontrollable? Like, I would wonder what would happen if you would pretend that this is a person that maybe you're noticing these things, or even asking yourself, like in that writing, is this a part of me that's coming out? Not that you get fixed on what comes through. I'm not saying to take it all seriously, that this is our answer. But it starts opening us up so that we have all these different ways of possibility and seeing what might emerge. And it takes some time. And because when you land on it, just like your intuition tells you in other ways, it's
just clicks.
It clicks. Exactly. There's some kind of, it's basically what we're doing is we're taking that flashlight of the ego, and all of a sudden you realize you have a dimmer switch. And instead of just be focused on this one little thing, you start controlling this dimmer and everything kind of starts lighting.
Yeah. The closest thing I ever got to it is one of the times we tried hiding instead of running.
Yeah.
Because I was like, maybe it's the chase. I don't know why my brain thought that. But I think it's because I was watching, what was it? I was watching an episode of something and they would kidnap girls. They would literally cut them loose in the woods and then hunt them and shoot them. But they wouldn't shoot them until they cut them loose and let them run. And they gave them like a head start or something so they could actually go hunt them like animals. I remember we ducked down, but I remember just standing. He was right in front of me, but it was so dark I couldn't see anything. And yeah, it didn't matter. Yeah, so worst case scenario, I just get shot again. I've already been shot like a million times, so why the hell not?
Yeah, and what comes to me on that is even exploring the sadistic nature of things, like the relationship between pain and pleasure and the misunderstanding of that in the nervous system and in the psyche. And like people that are sadistic will cause harm intentionally so that they can benefit, find joy from that experience. And not saying that's you or what you're doing at all. But exploring these difficult subjects in a creative way to be like, okay, is there this sadistic side of me? And you might explore that and go, no, this is not.
Now that I know exactly what you do. Because at first I was like, what the heck's a depth psychologist? And I was going, do you dig a hole and do psychology in the hole? I'm like, what happens? Is it like deep and dark? I was like, I don't know what we're going with, but it sounds super awesome. To be fair, I'm like, man, that kind of sounds like something I'd want to do until you said doctorate. And I was like, nope.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. Some days I'm like, I think you have to be a little psychotic to decide to go back to school in your 40s. Actually, I was 38, I think, when I went back to school for my doctorate. And yeah, I'm like 3 years into my 5-year program. I've completed the master's part of it, which allows us to call ourselves depth psychologists now. But I'm in the dissertation phase of writing, which will complete the PhD. So I have about 1.5 years left on part of it. And then it's 4 more years of analysis training to become an actual analyst.
Dear God.
It's a hefty amount of time. When you love something, you don't feel like you're doing time. You just feel like you're following that pull.
It's like I tell people, I was like, do you guys have any idea how much research I do? I spend hours and hours, but to me, I like it because it's topics that I want to talk about.
Exactly.
I have 2 college degrees, none of which put me anywhere near anything psychology based. So even when I was younger, I wanted to be something. I can't remember what the correct term is, but a genetic engineer. I wanted to study genetics and how they work and how they function and what's passed on and what's not. And when you're a genetic defect yourself, it makes it a little more interesting. But I always wanted to do that. And then they never taught us anything about psychology until I was in college. And then it was funny because I went in psychology and a lot of people were struggling with the concepts of what this is, what that is. And I went in and I just killed it. I loved it. It came so natural to me. It was fun and easy. And a lot of people, like I said, they were struggling. And I was like, I don't know. I was like, I just know. I was like, I can't explain it. I was like, I know what we're talking about. Yeah. And I was always super fascinated with it. I love it because I'm one of those people, like you said, I want to know why, which I think boils down to is I was already interested in genetics because I want to know, why am I so weird? I tell people I am like the most fucked up person you'll ever meet, physically and mentally probably. But let's narrow it down from starters. I have red hair naturally. So there's one. But there's a lot of people that are like, oh, I know a redhead. I'm like, cool. I have red hair and brown eyes. That narrows it down quite a bit because usually they're like hazel or blue. They're not generally brown. So out of all my family members who we all have red hair, which is interesting, all the kids do and none of our parents do, but we all have red hair and I'm the only one with brown eyes. And I was like, oh, I'm also left-handed. That narrows it down even more. And I was like, oh, and did I mention I have AB positive blood type? Find another me out there. I dare you. I was like, but I don't understand it because like my sisters, there's 3 of them and one's full blood. I have 2 halves on both sides. I have a half on both sides. They are all similar. They all have a bunch of stuff in common. I am the only oddball. Hell, even my half sisters look like my older sister and I don't. I'm like, if I didn't have, and they all have the same color red and I don't. I'm like a more that brassy orange color whenever there's actually light. And They all have that dark, deep red auburn almost type hair. And then mine's very strawberry blonde, orangey, like carrot top. And it's just so weird to me that I always wonder why. And then why is it that nobody else in my family has an issue and I am so mentally fucked up? Why am I like this? I don't get it. I don't understand. Why do I feel this way? Because I am miserable. And I just like to do this. So it'd be really cool. I definitely can't afford to go back to school, but at least I got to phone a friend in case I have any questions. I will keep that. What do they call that? Oh, what do they call those? There's phone a friend. Huh?
Rolodex?
On Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, you get a phone a friend, you get a 50-50.
Oh,
We'll just say bonus choices. We'll just call it that.
50. Yeah, no, I can't. I just totally.
Yeah, I don't know. Lifeline. Use the lifeline. Oh, I knew it'd come to me. My brain works in mysterious ways. We just got to fire it from the right direction. Again, everybody who's out there hanging out, if you're not watching the video, this is Melissa Kim Corter, who is absolutely gracing us with her presence today. So I really appreciate you being on here. And everybody, as per the normal, all of her links that she has given me are going to be down in the description. So go in there, check her out, follow, subscribe, everything you've got to do. Go buy her book. Wait, did we ever talk about what your book was?
I have a few books, but the one I'm excited about won't be out till 2025. So it's out. But I have a Substack blog. That's one of the links I think I gave you. So a lot of my writings and stuff can be found there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go there. I was like, wait a minute. Did I totally get derailed? Like I said, go over, show her some love. And again, I really appreciate you being on here. Do you have anything that you want to throw out there before we wrap up?
No, just thanks for your time. I love these conversations and I look forward to many more of them. And I love having the opportunity to share for all the black sheep and all I call them the mystical misfits.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
There's a place for us.
Thank you for tuning in. You guys know where to find me. My link's all down there, the store, all the socials, everywhere you listen, YouTube, all that fun jazz. You can find me everywhere. But until next time, see ya. Thank you for listening to this episode of Cryptids, Creeps, and Conspiracy. If you wouldn't mind, please take a moment and rate and review the show wherever you're listening. I know it might not seem like much, but it greatly helps the show by allowing us to be found more easily when other listeners search for us. If you have a chance, head on over to www.patreon.com/Cryptids, Creeps, and Conspiracy and become a patron. Members of the Big Show tier get bonus materials, personalized shout-outs, access to the private Discord server, and video versions of episodes, both regular and members only, that are raw and unedited. So they're always a good time. As an added thank you to the Big Show patrons, we also are going to be giving out custom stickers and mini prints after 3 months of membership. I'm currently offering a 7-day free trial, so head on over and see how awesome being a member can be. Before you go, click the link in the description and grab yourself or someone you know some of the self-designed merch, or make a donation to help keep the show going and fund future events and investigations. T-shirts, hoodies, stickers, and magnets, as well as pants, swimwear, the best tumblers I have found yet as far as merch is concerned, dresses, office supplies, and more. You can also follow the podcast on Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, Threads, and TikTok. If you have any questions, topic recommendations, or personal encounters, please don't hesitate to send them in to cryptidscreepsandconspiracy@gmail.com or submit them through the contact form at www.cryptidscreepsandconspiracy.com. I would love to hear from you and share your experience on a special listener episode. Just make sure to specify that I have permission to add your encounter to the show, and let me know whether you would like to have your real name or an alias to maintain confidentiality. Thank you again so much for all your support, and I'll see you next time, my friend.